How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is What If Manga Deku Went Back in Time. Sit back, relax, and enjoy, and now, let's begin. This is it, Shigaraki. You're not gonna come out of this alive. That's where you're mistaken, Izuku, Shigaraki would say, as all of a sudden a portal would open up right underneath Izuku's feet, as he starts to fall right through the portal. He looks up at Shigaraki, reaching out towards him to hopefully try to grab him, to defeat him once and for all, however he couldn't. As Izuku falls through the portal, his body starts to contort and shift into something else that just wasn't him. And all of a sudden, Izuku wakes up from his bed as if he just had a dream. Looking down at his hands, he realizes that he's now just only 4 years old. A bit more context of this, Izuku was just fighting Shigaraki after years of trying to capture him and hunt him down, but Shigaraki had made a portal underneath him, causing him to go back in time and jump into a different timeline, causing Izuku to be thrown right into the 4-year-old Izuku's body that was in this timeline. As Izuku, now with all of the memories and even the quirk that he had, he'd just be looking at his hands, just wondering, was it all just a dream or was it real? No, it was too vivid to be just a dream. It was too lifelike. So, that means I should have a quirk, Izuku would say to himself, using One For All at a tiny little percent of its power, just around 0.01% of its power, as red streaks go up and down Izuku's arms as a tiny little flash of lightning occurs before Izuku stops breathing heavily, as that was already so much power for just a tiny 4-year-old. So Izuku runs to his mother and asks him what day it is. She says it's June 16th, just one day after his birthday. Izuku would be thinking, wait, so that means I'm quirkless, right? Izuku would say as Inko would only look down at him, just thinking, did all the just sadness and sorrow that Izuku had been just given the day before on his birthday, saying that he didn't have a quirk, just disappear out of his mind when he went to bed? I'm sorry, sweetie, but no, you don't have a quirk. Izuku would sit down for a second before thinking. Standing up, he would declare that he had a quirk, as Inko would only stare down at Izuku, shaking her head. I'm sorry, Izuku, but the doctor said you don't have a quirk. I just don't see how you could have just gotten a quirk out of nowhere within a day. That's where you're wrong, Mom, Izuku would say happily before jumping up in the air. As he would jump up, all of a sudden he would stand there floating mid-air as Inko would stare just in complete awe. What? How do you have a quirk? This just doesn't make any sense, she would say as her entire body would start to shake. She would quickly go and grab Izuku's hand before throwing him into the car, as she would start to speed off right back to the doctor, as Izuku would only just be smiling off, knowing that there's fate of being sad. Izuku just not having a quirk, sad for him, was now just diminished, as he now had plenty of quirks, exactly 6 of them, in fact. So it would just be flying throughout this car. She twist and turn round the corners until she finally made it to the quirk doctor's office. Throwing open the door, she would demand to see the doctor. She would rush out, wondering what all the commotion was. Doctor, you just said my son was quirkless. Well, then explain this, she would say, pointing on towards Izuku, who would then hop in the air, now floating, as the doctor would look on just in shock as well. That's quite the anomaly. I presume we were wrong. We were wrong about your little Izuku then. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry for all the stress I might have caused you and little Izuku. But I'm extremely sorry once again. But I'm extremely busy now. Can you please leave and not stress out any of the other visitors here either? Inko would shake her head, explaining that she was sorry, the doctor, and would then leave, as she would then rush back towards her house, getting Izuku ready for school, before she would then just fly off towards school again, as the entire interaction of Izuku saying at a cork and going to the court doctor's office all happened within 30 minutes. So with Izuku now back at school, everyone would be staring at him, laughing about how he didn't have a quirk and this and that from the day prior. However, Izuku would then just smile. He can rewrite his own history. He doesn't need to just be this quirkless little kid anymore, someone who was just a punching bag for all of the other kids. But you're mistaken, guys. I do have a quirk. Bakugo would walk up to Izuku, placing a hand onto Izuku's shoulder. Come on, Izuku. No need for all of that nonsense. We all know you don't have a quirk. Just stop lying to yourself. You know it's not good for you. But Bakugo, I do have a quirk. Just look at this. Once again, just like he had demonstrated towards his mother and the doctor, Izuku would jump in the air before floating, as all of the class would look on just in complete awe. Whoa, you can fly? You're just like some of the superheroes in the comics. That's awesome! Many of them would say, as Izuku only just laugh. Yeah, I guess it is kind of awesome. Would say as all of the kids laugh before some of them would even put their hand under Izuku, just as if was he really flying? And he was. They would all awe at Izuku just saying how cool his quirk was. However, Bakugo would start clenching his fists. How dare Izuku take away all of his attention? That was his attention, rightfully his. He owned it after all. He owned all of it. How could Izuku just come in and steal it away from him? Bakugo would shake his head before showing everyone else his quirk. As we now cut forward a week, we see Izuku stretching before running around the playground. He knew he'd have to start early if he wanted to use One for All to its fullest potential, as he couldn't just use One for All, as he was a weak little 4-year-old, and if he really wanted to become strong, he was going to have to start training early. And so he would start to run around the playground, doing as many push-ups as his tiny little body could do, then doing sit-ups until he passed out, as he'd be doing these on the playground every day for recess before going back home, eating dinner, and then doing them until he passed out at night, sleeping, waking up, going to school, just doing that, running around the playground, coming back home, eating dinner, doing push-ups and sit-ups until he passed out. Every single day, day in and day out, Izuku's determination to become a hero was higher than ever. Izuku alone knew he was going to become a hero with all of his quirks. However, he knew that he couldn't just use them without training, so he would train his body to be able to manage them, and every single day he'd be able to unlock just a tiny little bit of One for All, or a tiny little bit of, say, Black Whip or Danger Sense or Smokescreen, as Izuku would continue on doing this. However, by the time he was 10, Izuku realized something. He was going to have to meet up with All Might, as this was right around the time that All Might's injury happened, as Izuku would tell his mother to please drop him off at the UA high school. She would wonder why Izuku wanted to be dropped off there, but really couldn't question the prodigy, as Izuku, keeping all of his smarts with him, was just a complete prodigy in school, to the point that almost everyone in the entire city has heard about the extreme smarts and just heroism that was Izuku, to the point where some hero agencies had even contacted Inko to ask if they could take Izuku for just 5 years until he could go into UA high school so that they could train Izuku to become the next greatest hero. However, Izuku would tell his mother that he didn't want to do this. He wanted to spend more time with her, as he couldn't just leave her for 5 years, as she was his own mother after all. That just wouldn't make any sense. So, with Inko trusting the young prodigy, she would drop him off at the UA high school before waving goodbye, as Izuku would then hop over the gates, causing all of the alarms to sound. As Izuku would start to stroll in, Nezu and Aizawa would come racing down, as they would then see the young Izuku. Well, not Aizawa, as he's not old enough yet to be a teacher there. Well, at least I don't think he is. So Nezu would come racing down with some of the other heroes there, as they would then see the young Izuku. Well, actually, yes, Aizawa. So Aizawa and Nezu come racing down as they see the young Izuku standing there. Aizawa would then just facepalm before saying, "Kid, what are you doing here? Oh, do you guys happen to know where All Might is? I know he's not working here yet, but I need to speak with him," Izuku would say, now his voice getting serious. Nezu would look at Izuku before asking, "What do you need to speak with him about, Izuku?" Nezu had fully known who Izuku was, having heard about the prodigy. "I have to warn him about something. In exactly 1 week's time, he's going to fight All for One. And then he's going to get severely injured, causing him to not be able to use his quirk One for All to its fullest extent." Nezu and Aizawa would take a double take before asking Izuku, "How do you know about One for All and All for One?" "It's quite hard to explain. Just please get me All Might before it's too late." Nezu would get out his cell phone before calling up All Might, who would come racing down to Yue. As Nezu had said, it's important matters. As All Might would come racing in, he would then see the young child standing there before Izuku would walk up to All Might. Izuku would put out his hand before saying that his name was Izuku Midoriya. All Might would shake the tiny hand, or just asking why he needed him to come here. "Well, All Might, I'll explain more about this in 5 years, but I'm the successor of One for All. You don't really need to know about that right now, as that's not really important. In exactly 1 week's time, you are going to get into an unavoidable fight with All for One, where you get severely injured, and this causes you to have a massive injury right at around the top or middle part of your chest. And I'm coming here to warn you about that. So, in exactly 1 week's time at 3 p.m., you cannot go out and do heroing, as you're going to encounter All for One. Yes, you are going to injure him, but it's far too risky for you to injure him as well." All Might would look down towards the boy before just blowing it off. How could this small child really he's spouting nonsense? He would look over towards Nezu and Aizawa before jumping off, shaking his head just in confusion. All of this really just confused All Might's brain. So, in exactly 1 week, Izuku would be watching the TV, as all of a sudden, Izuku would hear an explosion from miles away. As Izuku would go over, open the door before staring down at his mother. "I'll be back in a couple minutes, Mom," Izuku would say, as Inko would worriedly look over towards Izuku. "Oh, okay, Izuku, please don't get hurt. It stresses my little heart out way too much when you come back injured. Okay, please don't get hurt." Izuku would only smile before saying, "Oh, trust me, Mom, I won't," Izuku would say, now mad that All Might had disobeyed his words. Jumping off, Izuku would end up finding where All Might was, as he would start to fly off towards All Might using the tiny percentage of One for All that he could, just being around 10%, the max that his 10-year-old body could manage. As Izuku would reach there, he would use Black Whip, using it as he was angry, controlling it there as he would grab All Might right after All Might slammed his fist right into All for One's just head, causing All for One and his head smashed down into concrete, now severely injured. Right as All for One would get up, Black Whip would come in, surrounding All Might, picking up All Might, as All Might would then be sent flying with Izuku, holding him down below him, as Izuku would end up landing down into a dirt field, throwing All Might down, yelling at All Might that he was just about to get injured, that he's lucky he pulled him out right away. All for One, sensing that All Might wasn't going to come back, would create a portal before going back to get instant healings from just the quirk doctor who would be helping him and just creating all of the Nomus, just his most trusted advisor. Izuku staring down at All Might would then just blow All Might off, leaving, letting All Might stand there, just breathing heavily after fighting with his nemesis, All for One. As Izuku would be jumping off, he would and end up making it back to his house. As we now cut forward 5 years, Izuku would be sitting inside his middle school classroom as the teacher would then walk into the room. "Good morning, class. I know all of you want to be heroes, don't you? And it even excites me that 2 of you want to try out for UA. That's quite impressive of all of you. It's Bakugo Katsuki and Izuku Midoriya," you would say, proclaiming loudly, as all of the students would look on towards Izuku and Bakugo, many of them looking towards Izuku, nodding their heads in approval. "Yeah, Izuku's gonna make it into UA. There's no chance he doesn't. He's the strongest one out of all of us. He's insane," many of them would think, as many of the students would nod their heads. However, once they turned to Bakugo, many of them would nod their heads again. Yeah, but Bakugo's attitude problem really would hold him back as a hero. Bakugo would stand up in his desk yelling, "The hell did you damn extra say?" He would say towards them, as they would only just stare blankly at him. See, there's my point. Bakugo really had no power to stand on, as with Izuku being there, he made sure that bullying just wasn't a problem at all. And so Bakugo, just not having any leverage to just bully everyone, to make them scared of him, everyone really just would look at Bakugo just like an angry little puppy or something. So, Izuku would be walking home from school, just as on time, a sludge villain would end up appearing out of nowhere. As the sludge villain would come to attack Izuku, Izuku would turn around, sensing that the sludge villain was right behind him, winding his fist back, now being able to wield just about 30% of One For All, slamming his fist in the air, causing air pressure to be sent flying into the sludge villain, as it would then explode, shattering all throughout the walls. As this would happen, All Might would then jump out of the sewer drain, looking for the sludge villain. "Young boy, do you happen to know where a sludgy-looking thing happens to be?" "Oh, yes, All Might, the sludge villain, he's right there, a little bit's over here." As All Might would look around all throughout where Izuku's pointing, just seeing the sludge scattered all throughout the walls. "He did attack me first, so it is basically self-defense." All Might would look on towards the boy before thanking him for being able to stop him and just allowing him not to use up his quirk even further, as All Might was already super tired from having to defeat many villains. However, All Might still doesn't have this injury, still basically in the midst of his prime. So when he'd go to jump off, Izuku would jump off as well, going with All Might as well, using Fajin with the kinetic energy quirk, allowing him to jump off at super speed, keeping up with All Might. As All Might ended up landing, he would look over towards the boy who would now be flying right in front of him. "Toshinori Yagi, I've got some explaining to do, don't I?" Izuku would say, as All Might would stare on towards Izuku. "How are you using Nana's quirk?" he would say, as Izuku would laugh. "Well, I inherited this power through One For All," Izuku would say, as All Might would look over towards Izuku. "What do you mean, you inherited it?" "Well, I'm the 9th user of One For All. All Might, you were the 8th, and Nana's the 7th. Well, I come from, just in the future, possibly a different timeline. It still confuses me a bit, but I come from in the future, and I know everything about this. I was the successor of yours to One For All. You gave me your quirk. You have no recollection of this because it hasn't happened yet. And it doesn't need to, because I already have it. I know about All For One, One For All, and all of this, so you don't have to worry. Just wanted to tell you it. And I also know you're about to start working at UA High School. So, just like to tell you that I'm the successor to One For All, at least from my timeline, that is. So it's good to meet you, All Might. It's good to meet you." All Might, still a bit confused, would just say, "Okay, kid. What's your name?" "Oh, it's Izuku Midoriya, the person that saved you from getting injured." "Ah, it's this kid again. Well, why don't you go on home, please? I really can't deal with you right now. All Might's remembering the kid just couldn't deal with him, as he just really thought about Izuku being crazy. However, now with Izuku using Nana's cork float, it made him realize that all of Izuku's nonsense and words were actually kind of true. And so All Might just had a lot to think about so he just decided to hop off, allowing for Izuku to go home. 10 months later, and a beach now being clean, we see Izuku walking into the UA campus, staring up at the golden arches in front of him, looking on towards the massive 3D H-looking building. Walking in, he would walk into an auditorium before sitting down, as we now see President Mike walking out onto just the auditorium stand. Good evening, examinees trying to get into Class 1A. It's gonna be quite the long evening, isn't it? It's already 9 p.m. at night. So, since it's this late, wouldn't it be good to give you all a 12-hour test? President Mike would say, as all of the students would just stare on like, what? What did he say? You're kidding, right? You can't just give us a 12-hour test. This just doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? Many of them thinking this, as Izuku would only just blurt out laughing. President Mike, along with the rest of the students, would stare at him, as Izuku would then stand up. So, you did this so that we'd all be tired taking this exam, meaning that we still have to be 100% even while we're basically falling asleep. Well, you're not wrong. So I'll have some of these helpers pass out exams, and once you get it, you can begin. Good luck on these next 12 hours, and if you're caught cheating, just know you'll never make it into another hero school again. You won't even be able to try out. So, good luck, President Mike would say, as Izuku would get his test after having it passed to him, as Izuku would instantly fly through the test. Since Izuku being a prodigy, knowing all of just high school information at the age of 4, he would be put into special classes that made him excel even further, being the smartest in those smart classes, causing him to gain knowledge that he wouldn't have in the normal timeline. So with that, he would be just one of the smartest kids in the world even. So with him flying through this, he would easily finish it within 3 hours, passing it up, being allowed to go home at exactly 12 a.m. as Izuku to get some sleep, as the very next day at just around 9 a.m. he was going to have to be doing a hero exam, meaning that all of the students wanting to take the hero exam would have to take a 12-hour test, and if they didn't complete it in the 12 hours or just barely did, they just also have to go into an hero exam with very little sleep and being very tired. So as the day would pass, Izuku would get up and would walk off towards the UA high school, and is now seen stretching, as he sees many of his future classmates and other students standing there just very drowsy and tired. Izuku would ask them why they were so tired, as they would say, "How are you not tired? We just had to take a 12-hour test with no sleep. We're going into the hero exam. I'm so gonna fail." Many of them would say, as the doors would open, Izuku remembering what President Mike had said just all the way back when he was at this moment for the first time. He would rush off, now using 50% of One For All, some of the max that he can manage at this point. Rushing off, now using full count, would end up breaking through all of this, just smashing through all of just the robots, easily just defeating them all with such ease and precision, using Black Whip, pulling many of the robots together, punching them further. As Izuku would be doing this, he would jump up into the air, floating, looking for even more robots, calculating all of the points that he had gotten into his brain. Looking around further, he would end up spotting even more robots, flicking down, causing air to be sent flying down towards them, landing, smashing these robots into tiny little bits and pieces. As Izuku would be doing this, he would decide to sit up against a building. I might as well let some of the other students get some points after all. I guess I'll just watch to see if any of them gets hurt at all. As I've calculated, I already have 150 points, so I might as well just help some of them, Izuku would say. Dropping that down, he would end up meeting up with a net-haired girl. As he would end up introducing himself towards her, she would end up running off, just talking with Izuku. Hello, Uraraka, he would say as she would look at him. Wait, how do you know my name? Oh, my mistake. Lucky guess. Izuku would say, well, I'm Izuku. You, Ochako Uraraka, she would say, kind of confused. Oh, do you need any help with, defeating any robots? I've already defeated some, and I think I should start helping some other people. Uraraka would say, okay. If you can bring me some robots, that'd be nice. Izuku would nod his head. Using Black Whip, he would pull towards robots towards her, and she would then cause them to float before dropping them, as they would then just be destroyed. Izuku would say, well, best of luck to you, Uraraka, before rushing off to go find some other robots or some other people to help. 5 minutes later, all of a sudden, the ground would start shaking, as Izuku would end up hitting himself right onto the forehead. Oh, I forgot. He's probably stuck under some rubble right now, Izuku would think. Before jumping off, he would end up finding the girl stuck under a pile of rocks. Izuku would see the Zero Pointer towering over her as it would start to reach its hand down towards her. Izuku, using Black Whip, would pull all of the boulders off of her. However, he would see that her leg was broken. He would use Black Whip, grabbing the girl before grabbing her, throwing her back towards him as he would catch her, putting her onto the ground, before he would start hopping back and forth, until he had enough energy built up. Now using Fajin, one of his quirks, as he would explode off right on towards the Zero Pointer, flying right through the Zero Pointer's head, causing it to be destroyed instantly, as the Zero Pointer would start to malfunction before finally falling down onto the ground. Izuku would stand up once again, looking on towards the Zero Pointer that he had managed to destroy. That took a lot of energy, Izuku would say, before looking back to see Recovery Girl tending to the girl's wounds, as she would then stand up holding her head quite tired, having just had to go off of no sleep and just be recovered by Recovery Girl. Over the intercoms, they would then say that they may now all go home if they are finished, and if they are injured, they will be taken to Recovery Girl's office to rest up for the night. Izuku would walk home, entering into his house as he would smell his favorite meal cooking on the stove. As Izuku would walk in, Inka would turn her head towards Izuku, smiling before asking him, "So, Izuku, how was the exams?" "Oh, I think it went quite well. I think I managed to get around 190 points or so. I'd say my chances are quite high of making it into Class 1A. He would say as Inka would then rush over, jumping into Izuku's arms, hugging him tightly. "Oh, I'm so proud of you, Izuku. I remember that first day when you said you were quirkless, but you actually did have a quirk. Many of them. I can't believe it. I can't wait to see you grow into a strong hero, just like All Might, just like you said when you were young." Izuku would just laugh. "Yeah, I can't wait to see myself turn into an All Might #1 hero too. I can't wait to count how many civilians and just victims I save. I'm gonna make it my goal to save as many people as possible," Izuku would say, as Inka would only smile onto her son, so proud of what he had become. As this would be happening, 2 weeks would pass, with Izuku getting a letter in the mail saying that he had made it into Class 1A. Izuku would smile down at the letter, showing it to his mother, saying, "I'm in." As another week would pass, Izuku would be putting on his UA uniform, walking on towards the UA campus after running out of his house, going towards his first day of school at UA. As Izuku would make it into Class 1A, he would easily remember the directions, although it was a bit foggy, having been exactly around just about 11 or so years since he had been in the classroom. So with Izuku flying through the halls, he would open the door before sitting down in his seat that he remembered he had. With memories flooding back into his mind, he would end up smiling, thinking, those were good times. As Aizawa and the rest of his classmates would slowly slouch into the room, so once all of his classmates would be in, Izuku would ask everyone to quiet down, and sure enough, Aizawa would slowly strut into the room. Wow, I'm impressed. A good 15 seconds or so it took you all to quiet down. Quite the good time, I would say. So, anyway, please go down to the locker rooms and put your PE uniforms on. I'm going to be testing all of your quirks. As all of the students would nod their heads before flying down to the locker rooms, getting changed insanely quickly, before making it off towards wherever Aizawa had told them to go. As they were now there, Aizawa would then show them what he wanted them to do. So, Izuku, you're Izuku, right? Yes, Izuku would answer. Here, take this ball and step into this zone. I want you to throw the ball as far as you possibly can. Izuku would nod his head before winding back his fist, now using 50% of one for all throughout his entire body. With that there, he would throw the ball as far as he could, sending it flying through 2,000 meters, as all of the students would stare on, just in complete shock. That's awesome! Can I go next? Then Aizawa would only look on towards them. UA's gonna be so fun, many of them would say. Aizawa, hearing this, would have his head violently turned towards the people that said that. Fun? Fun, you say? What about having to see some of your comrades or even victims of villains die right in front of you? Being a hero isn't fun. So how about this? The person that comes in last place, he'll get expelled, Aizawa would say, as all of the students would stare on just at Aizawa. Wait, you can't do that, can he? This can't be true. I just spent all 15 hours through exams to make it here. I don't have to go another 15 hours next year. Oh, if you get expelled, you're not ever gonna be allowed to come back. Can't believe I have to say that to you all. So, Bakugo Katsuki, you got second. Why don't you go up next? As all of the students would end up making it throughout the exams, as Izuku would be first throughout all of the testing, Bakugo would be around third, Momo in second, and Mineta would be in last place. However, Aizawa would sigh. Sadly, I see potential in all of you. So, luckily for you, none of you will be expelled. All right! Many of them would say, jumping into the air. As we see Izuku rushing back, we now see all of the students going back to the classrooms having been dismissed. Izuku going slow, walking back to his house. He would then be stopped by Bakugo Katsuki in an open street, as Izuku had been taking the long way home just to look at the scenery around. Izuku, I challenge you once and for all to show you that I'm stronger and better than you. Bakugo, this really just isn't the time for us to be fighting right now. And besides, we're probably going to be sparring at least 1,000 other times this year. This is a hero school after all. Why would I fight you now when we're obviously going to fight later on? Plus, if you get hurt, I'm gonna be the one getting in trouble because you're the one hurt. It just doesn't make any sense. See you later, Bakugo, Izuku would say as Bakugo would only clench his fists in anger, rushing up to Izuku before placing his hand onto Izuku's shoulder, gripping it tightly. You're not going anywhere until I beat you. Izuku would turn his head, looking straight on at Bakugo's eyes, glaring at him as Bakugo would recoil. I told you, Bakugo, I'm not going to fight you. It's pointless right now, Izuku would say before walking off. As Bakugo would be standing there clenching his fists tighter and tighter that his nails were digging into his skin, causing the palms of his hand to start bleeding. As Izuku would continue off, just walking off, as Bakugo would who would just find him to just be gone, having disappeared into the distance, as he would go off to walk back to his house. 2 weeks later, we see Izuku sitting in class just staring on at the blank chalkboard in front of him. All of a sudden, however, the room starts to shake as Izuku looks down onto the ground, placing his bare hand right on it as he feels the entire building shaking. As all of a sudden, there, All Might sprinting down the hall would break into the Class 1A classroom, sending the boards and timbers of the doors splattering everywhere as all of the students would stare on, just, whoa, it's the number one hero, many of them would say, barely being able to talk as their entire body would start shaking. They've never seen All Might in person before, and there, stood in front of them in all of his glory, was the number one hero, All Might. So all of them would be staring there. All Might would give out a laugh. Yeah, All Might here, and I'm your new hero teacher. So, why don't we begin? You all can't be heroes without hero costumes, can you? All Might would say in a strong voice, clicking down on a red button. As all of a sudden, out of the corner of everyone's eye, they see a compartment start to open up out of the wall. As there, just a bunch of suitcases would slowly roll out of the wall. Many of the students would rush over, grabbing their suitcase, looking at it, as they would then realize, wait, you really mean we already have our hero costumes? We just put in the designs yesterday. Well, thankfully, the support corps went to work last night. They all managed to make them all quite quickly. I mean, these are just the prototype versions of them, though. You all know you can just modify them whenever you want. However, you're not going to be doing that in class time. You'd have to go after hours right to the support corps classroom. As All Might would be saying that, you would and tell everyone to go down to the locker rooms, get changed, and then head off to City Site C, as they are going to basically be doing their first ever hero assignment. As all of them, with such excitement and glee, they would rush down to the locker room, getting changed into their hero costumes before rushing back to wherever All Might said them to go. As many of them would be looking at all of their hero costumes, just wondering, whoa, that's your hero costume? That's quite cool. They would just be pointing out each other's hero costumes, complimenting them, saying how nice they looked, or if it was stupid or ugly or not. So once all of the students would get down to wherever All Might told them to go, they would all just be sitting there, waiting for the directions of the shining golden hero standing in front of them. Alright, let's begin with a 2-team assignment. One team, heroes, and the other team, villains. So, these 2 teams will be teams of 2. 2 heroes, 2 villains. Villains will be deciding or hiding wherever they hide this device, thanks to and supplied by the support course. Once again, big thanks to them. And the heroes will have 15 minutes to capture both of the villains or touch the device, therefore deactivating it. However, the villains can win by capturing both of the heroes or drawing out that time limit, causing for the heroes not to be able to capture them or touch the device in the 15-minute limit. So, why don't we begin with the name draw? Bakugo Katsuki and Tenya Ida versus Uchaku Uraraka and Izuku Midoriya. Izuku's team will be the heroes, and Bakugo's team will be the villains. Bakugo, why don't you go ahead and go and set up the device? All Might would say as Bakugo would grab the device before going into the building, hiding it onto the top floor. As 5 minutes would pass, All Might would then give a signal for Izuku's team, the heroes, to step into the building. As they would walk in, they would all look around, wondering where the device was hidden. As Izuku, recollecting what had happened just 2 weeks before, and the first time he had dealt with such a scenario, he would know that Bakugo was most likely about to come around a corner. So as Izuku would continue on walking, right as he got to the 2nd floor, he would stop. Izuku could sense that something was about to happen. Bakugo must be behind that corner that was right in front of them. As Izuku would see this, he would start to make smoke all throughout the hallways, making it hard for him even to see. As Bakugo, seeing the smoke, would wonder what the hell was that. Izuku didn't have some sort of smoke quirk, did he? He just couldn't figure out anything right now. As Bakugo would walk through the smoke, all of a sudden, green lightning would start to spew out of Izuku. As Bakugo would stare on at this green lightning before realizing that Izuku was standing right in front of him. As Izuku with one punch would send air pressure flying throughout the room, hitting Bakugo right in the face. As all of the smoke would clear up, as Izuku now stood right over Bakugo, would punch him right across the face, as Izuku would then ask Uraraka to go up throughout the floors and find the device, while he took care of the hothead Bakugo. As Bakugo would jump up, launching himself towards Izuku, sending explosions flying in different directions, causing holes in the building walls to just start shattering the walls away. As Izuku's punches didn't help that either, as Bakugo would be punched, sending him flying into one of the walls, or Izuku would be sent flying backwards because of one of Bakugo's explosions. As this was happening, the second floor walls would start to slowly be eaten away, as finally only the support pillars would end up be standing, as every punch or explosion thrown would cause the entire building to end up shaking, as Uraraka, feeling this, would know not to enter the final floor, knowing that if this building were to topple over, she would easily be able to jump and grab the device, while Ito would most likely not be able to, not being able to use his quirk in the air. However, she didn't know if he could or not. She's just hoping that he can't. So with this fight still going on, Uraraka watching, all of the sudden, Izuku would punch Bakugo, sending him flying, slamming into one of the pillars. As one of the pillars would cause one of the corners of the building to start dipping down, as Bakugo would then launch himself forward, propelling himself off of another one of the pillars, breaking that as the entire other side of the building would start to collapse, as Izuku, seeing this, would destroy both of the pillars right next to him, as the entirety of the upper floors would start to cave down into the second floor. Izuku, knowing Bakugo's chance of survival was limited, he would flick his finger, causing air pressure to consume Bakugo, sending him flying into one of the buildings right next to this one. As the building would start to collapse, Uraraka, seeing this, would jump out, grabbing onto the device. As All Might would then come over the speaker, saying that the hero team had won. However, he would race off, seeing that the building was collapsing, trying to hopefully not have anyone injured. As Izuku would be buried under all of the rubble, he would then slowly climb himself out, or just get out of all of the rubble. As he would be standing there on top of everything, you'd end up seeing Uraraka and Ida under a thin, just couple of bricks. Izuku would pick them both out of there before dragging them over to where All Might was, as he would end up meeting up with them before asking Izuku to take all three of them to go to Recovery Girl's office. As the ceiling had caved down onto them, even though Uraraka had grabbed the device, the ceiling wasn't going to care at all. It's an inanimate object, so it would end up falling on top of both of them, making both of them just be stuck under rubble, which this wasn't the first time for Uraraka, meaning she's quite the experienced person to be buried alive. So as all of the rest of Izuku's classmates would end up going and taking the assignment, Izuku would be sitting in Recovery Girl's office, just hoping that all three of the people that were on Izuku's team or against Izuku's team were going to be okay. As Recovery Girl would tell Izuku that he can go home now, as it's already been the entirety of the day, and since Izuku's been waiting there since the start. They're most likely not going to wake up, as they had some pretty severe injuries that she had to heal, taking out a lot of their energy. Izuku would nod his head, signifying that, yeah, alright, I understand. Before going home, Izuku didn't want to hurt any of his classmates. Sure, some of them might be a little crazy than others, being Bakugo, but he really just couldn't care less if they're like that. They're still his classmates, and so who cares if they're crazy or not? So after that, Izuku going home would end up telling his mother all about the day he had at school, as she would end up smiling knowing that her son was most likely having fun at his hero school and was most likely going to become one of the best heroes of all time. At least that's just her mother's side talking, wanting Izuku to be the best that he possibly can be. And so after a couple more weeks of training, this and that, they would finally have their first field trip to a building far off of campus. Sure, it was on campus, but it was the farthest building away from the main building, miles away from it, and it was going to take a 30-minute drive to get there. Aizawa would slowly walk into the room before telling of them, "Alright, class, today we're going to be going on to a field trip. We're gonna be going to the USJ. Don't worry about your parents' permission. We already got all of that. So, just go down to the locker rooms, put your hero costumes on, and yeah, just get onto the bus, located on the bus bay, just right outside the locker rooms." All of the students would race off, going to get her hero costumes on, as Aizawa would already be seated on the bus by the time all of them got there. As the bus would then speed off towards the USJ, Izuku would walk over towards Aizawa and would tell him something. "Aizawa, I have a bad feeling about this USJ thing. Just, why don't you guys... Actually, I have a plan." "What do you mean, plan? You're not making any sense, Izuku," Aizawa would respond. "It's fine, Aizawa, trust me," Izuku would say, as the bus would slowly roll up to the USJ, as Izuku would end up walking in to the USJ along with the rest of their class, as 13 would end up showing all of them just the different types of zones from the top of the stairwell, as Izuku would danger sense, as he would know that the villains were coming already. Izuku would start to fill the entire USJ with smoke, as Aizawa would end up asking, "What are you doing? Why are you filling this entire place with smoke?" "Just trust me, Aizawa. Please take the rest of the class and leave right now." Aizawa would look on confused before being like, "Fine. Come on, class. I don't understand Izuku right now." 13 and Aizawa would both leave after a little bit of persuasion from Izuku. As Izuku would then flick with his finger, causing all of the smoke to dissipate, he would be the lone person standing up at the top of the staircase. As Shigaraki and a ton of other villains would then step out of this purple mysterious portal. "Hello, UA! We are the League of Villains, and we're coming here to end the #1 hero that is All Might," Shigaraki would say. However, once he would look up towards Izuku, he would end up just wondering, "Wait, you! Where's the rest of Class 1A? Shigaraki would demand, with where was All Might. However, Izuku would only shake his head. "Shigaraki, I'm here to end you, just like you came here to end All Might." Shigaraki, seeing this, would just say, "Go and kill that brat. I don't have enough time for this," Shigaraki would say, starting to scratch his neck in annoyance. As Shigaraki would then point out his hand, yelling for all of the villains to go attack them, or him, as the neck scratching would start to get even more violent, as he was just so irritated. "Where's the rest of Class 1A? Where's All Might? This just doesn't make any sense. On the Class 1A schedule, it said they would all be here, not just one kid. All for One's gonna kill me after this." So with all of the villains charging up the stairs, Izuku, seeing this, would end up flicking right at the stairs, causing them to start to collapse, as all of the villains would start to fall on top of each other or fall back down onto the stairs. Injuring many of them, Izuku would then just jumping over to where Shigaraki was, going to punch him. However, the Nomu would be there to stop it. Since All Might never got injured in this What If, the Nomu is going to be a lot stronger. Right as the Nomu blocked Izuku's punch, a massive wind would end up flying right back behind it. Just how powerful Izuku's punch was. As in just diameter and area where Izuku's punch would have been, it was a massive dent in the USJ, a massive crater. So the Nomu would stare down lifelessly towards Izuku. It would wind his hand back before punching Izuku square in the face, slamming his hand right into the cheek of Izuku, sending him flying backwards right into the stairwell. However, he would catch himself using his cork float. As Izuku would be staring on at the Nomu, just saying how the Nomu was a lot stronger. Guess that's what happens when you save All Might from getting injured. Izuku would breathe in before breathing out, calming himself down. As Izuku would end up using Black Whip, grabbing onto Shigaraki, pulling him closer towards him, using Black Whip just like Aizawa's scarf. However, the Nomu would see this grabbing on to Shigaraki, holding his hands around him, making sure that Shigaraki wasn't going to go near Izuku. However, as Izuku started to pull tighter and tighter, Shigaraki would start to scream out in pain from how tight it was around his body. So Nomu would let go after being demanded to by Shigaraki. Shigaraki would be sent flying towards Izuku before being uppercut right by him and then jumping up, slamming him down onto the ground. However, the Nomu would be there catching Shigaraki before placing him back onto the ground, as Shigaraki, now mad, would stand up, yelling for the Nomu to kill this damn brat already, to stop toying with him. The Nomu would give off a screech in understandment before rushing off towards Izuku, pained that it had hurt his master. So as the Nomu would rush towards Izuku, it would throw many rapid punches right on at Izuku. However, Izuku continued on dodging them, going back and back until he was finally at a wall, where he would then jump up, floating in the air, or using One For All to fly around Nomu, punching him right in the back of the head, causing the Nomu to fall down to his knees, as Izuku then used Black Whip to grab onto the Nomu, throwing him up into the ceiling. So the Nomu would be thrown into the ceiling before slamming into the glass roof, as the Nomu would then start to fall back down, slamming into the ground, causing just a massive dust cloud to explode into the air. The Nomu would give off a screech in pain before rushing off at Izuku once more, sending massive amounts of punches right at him, this time faster than ever, all landing right onto Izuku. However, it just didn't seem like they did anything to him, as they were just far too weak. As Izuku, having enough of this, would then start to jump back and forth before winding back his fist and slamming it right into the Nomu's chest, completely obliterating the lower half of the Nomu. And before the Nomu could regenerate, Izuku would grab the brain of the Nomu, since the Nomu didn't have a skull covering that part, before ripping the brain out of the mindless husk that used to be a person. As the Nomu's body would fall down to the ground, now the regeneration no longer there, as Izuku would throw the brain onto the ground as it would then flop down onto it. Shigaraki would look on in complete and utter shock that Izuku had managed to defeat the Nomu. However, Izuku would rush in, grabbing onto Kirogiri within an instant, pulling apart its metal parts, making sure that Kirogiri wasn't going to be able to use his portals, before rushing off towards Shigaraki, punching Shigaraki right across the face. However, before anything else could happen, all of a sudden the doors would end up being blown away, as there stood All Might, standing in all of his glory, before rushing down, grabbing Izuku, punching Shigaraki. As Izuku not being able to finish off Shigaraki, he would be able to get away with the recovered Kirogiri. So All Might would put down Izuku, yelling at him for how dangerous that was, while Izuku would only just grab his head in frustration. All Might, I was trying to defeat that damn villain. You don't understand what magnitude your decision just had. That's your decision right there. Probably just killed thousands of people. You don't understand it now, but you will later, Izuku says, as All Might would only look down at Izuku before grabbing onto his arm. You've got a lot of explaining to do, Izuku, he would say before pulling Izuku out of the USJ, as police officers would then rush into the building, as they would then just tie up all of the villains. All Might would then put Izuku into Nezu's office, as guards would end up coming in, putting quirk-canceling handcuffs onto Izuku before putting him into a quirk-canceling interrogation room, as Nezu didn't want to risk anything. Izuku, I want to ask you a question. How did you know that there was going to be a villain attack at the USJ? Oh, you know about One for All, don't you, Nezu? Yes, of course I do, and I know you know about it too. And you've said you're the ninth successor of that, but All Might hasn't found one yet. Yes, well, look at this. I can't really never believed I've shown you before, but I guess this can just act as proof. Izuku would use One for All, as Nezu would then nod his head. So I guess you really weren't lying. But that doesn't explain how you knew there was going to be a villain attack. Do you mind explaining it to me, Izuku? Because it appears I'm just being a bit dull right now, aren't I? Oh, well, I have another quirk called Danger Sense. I can sense when there's about to be danger. It's kind of hard to explain. I sensed that there was about to be just villains there, so I told Aizawa to just take all of my other classmates and leave. That explains some of it, I guess. But why were you yelling at All Might that you wanted to defeat that villain? He told me how All Might's decision to save you just cost him thousands of lives. Was that some sort of threat, Izuku? If so, I'm gonna have to take it seriously, you know. No, Nezu, it wasn't a threat. Just like I told the All Might, you don't understand it now, but you will later. I just don't want to explain it now. But that Shigaraki there, he's probably one of the world's greatest, just, threats. So, yeah, simple as that. Fine. Classes will resume tomorrow, and you will have the UA Sports Festival in just about a week, Su would say before dismissing Izuku, as a week would end up passing as we see Izuku walking into class. Good morning, class, Aizawa would sigh. As you all know, today is the UA Sports Festival, so why don't we all begin? So, now just go down to the bus bay, I'll lead you there, yada yada yada. Then you're going to be dropped off at the Class 1A waiting room / locker room. Just get changed and then go into the waiting room. Wait for them to call you out there, and then the rest will just be explained to you later. So I will just slowly explain in a sad, depressing voice. As we cut forward to see all of the students now onto a bus, as we see Yuasui walk up to Izuku. Hey, Izuku, do you mind telling us what your quirk is? You've used multiple, and I'm kind of just confused, really. Oh, my quirk. It's really hard to explain, but it's like I can have multiple quirks at one time, but the quirk just disappears if I don't use it enough. It's just really strange and really powerful. It really just doesn't make any sense to me at all. Izuku would, as Asui would kind of nod her head like, okay, sure. I guess I'll believe that. So as the bus would pull up to the Coliseum, they would then go into the locker rooms, getting changed before now being out into the waiting room. As they would all be sitting there, we now see all of them sitting as the doors would open. And now, welcoming your Class 1A, Midnight would announce over the speakers, as the crowd would then erupt into cheers. The building looked as if it was shaking, as all of them would walk out, and as soon as the first one stepped foot onto the grass, the crowd would erupt into 2 times the amount of cheers and just twice as loud. As they would all be standing there, Midnight would then start to laugh. Well, now that all of the classes are out, let the UA Sports Festival now begin, she would exclaim, as all the crowd would start to cheer in excitement. So, let's begin with the first event, a race. There's going to be 3 or 4 obstacles. I don't know. "Oh, why don't you all go into that hallway there, and that will be the starting line," she would say. So all of them now in the hallway would be sitting there as Izuku would use his quirk to float over everyone and to get into the front. As the doors would open, much like they just had for the waiting rooms, Izuku would explode off using One for All along with Float to fly, flying right through just the 0 pointer, as the metal had been made significantly weaker on it so that it didn't hurt any of the general studies classes or students. So, as Izuku seeing this, he would fly right through the head of the 0 pointer with such ease, flying over the second obstacle and then the minefield, landing right down before walking right in to the Colosseum. And there's Izuku Midoriya coming in first, setting a new UA record at just 5 minutes, she would say, as 10 more minutes would pass before Bakugo, having exploded through the 0 pointer and basically just flown over the other two, much like Izuku, just gone, as Todoroki coming in not so behind in third, as Izuku's class and some other kids would end up passing as well. And now that the first event is just closed, let the second event go underway. This will be a cavalry battle of teams of 4. I'll give all of you 5 minutes to decide your teams, Midnight would say, making it obvious that she didn't want to bring all of the details up just yet, as it would severely limit the team-making aspect of it. So, as they would just go around getting their teams, Izuku would get a team of Ochako Uraraka, Tenya Ida, and Shoto Todoroki, making sure that he got quite the strong team. As Uraraka would join him because how many times he saved her and just because he is reliable, Ida would do that mainly because Uraraka, Ida, and Izuku are quite good friends, and Todoroki would be there just because Izuku asked him first. So with that, our teams would be made, as Midnight would then step up, saying that the 5 minutes were now over. However, she had given them all of the details, she would say with a grim look. So, the person in first place happens to have 10 million points, second has 500, and third 250, and on this board you'll see the rest of the scaling there. The higher the place, the just higher the points, she would say, as all of them would now glare on at Izuku's team, as Uraraka and Ida would, or just Ida would say, this was a bad idea, joining your team. Sorry, Izuku, I just don't mean to be rude. As they would all get into formation as the match would then begin, as many of this people would rush off, going right on towards Izuku's team, right off the bat because of Izuku's 10 million points. However, utilizing Float, he would fly up into the air as his danger sense would kick in, dodging some attacks from behind and allowing him to dodge or attacks, sensing where they were coming from. As this would be happening, Izuku would end up looking up at the timer, seeing that 20 minutes had passed. However, not 20 minutes, but 5 minutes had passed. All of a sudden, Izuku, sensing something, would end up ducking before lifting up his hand, using One for All, punching the person that was right above him. This happened to be Bakugo Katsuki, as he would be sent flying up, propelling into the air. As all of the crowd would look up at how high this had gone, as Bakugo would then redirect himself with explosions right on towards Izuku. Damn it, Deku! I told you I'm gonna get that band of yours, he would say, exploding right down, falling down towards Izuku, reaching towards his headband. However, Izuku would twist his body in such a way, slamming his fist into the side of Bakugo's head, sending him flying back into a horde of people. As all of the people would end up falling down, Izuku would float back down towards his team, as they would then just start to avoid everyone else. And sure enough, Izuku's team would end up getting first place with the highest amount of points ever once again, with just around 10,001,000 points. So, as a waiting period would end up finishing, giving all of the students time to rest, Izuku would be told that he's the first person, or just going to be up against Shinso in the first match of the 1v1 tournament. As Midnight would walk up to the stand before saying, "And now, Izuku Midoriya versus Shinso. Let the round now begin!" As Izuku steps up onto the arena, he stares dead into the eyes of Shinso, thinking about what his plan's going to be. Izuku starts to recollect on all of the different events that he had with Shinso, and how, and just what Shinso's quirk is. Izuku, of course, would know that Shinso's quirk is a brainwashing quirk, and so he wouldn't answer any of his questions. Even though Shinso may try all he might, Izuku wasn't going to budge one bit. As the match would begin, Shinso would start throwing and spitting compliments, well, not compliments, just complaints and just rude details about all of Izuku's classmates, saying how they are only just lowlifes searching for attention, being at the top of UA's spectrum of all of these stupid little hero classes and this and that. Izuku, however, just couldn't care less about any of Shinso's just complaints or whatever he was saying. Izuku didn't care at all. And so when Izuku started to walk towards Shinso, and Shinso started to just talk and talk even further, this made Izuku know that Shinso was most likely nervous now, since Izuku wasn't answering him at all. So, once Izuku would get into reaching distance of Shinso, Izuku would crack his knuckles before winding his fist back. Shinso, seeing an opportunity, would go for a punch, however, Izuku would duck down before uppercutting Shinso right in the stomach. And Shinso would then be sent flying upwards, coughing out after being punched so hard in the gut. As Izuku would then use One For All on his legs, jumping up, as both of his hands now clenched together, towering above his head, he would slam them down into the back of Shinso, as he would fall just smashing down into the ground beneath him, as Shinso, not feeling such incredible pain before, would easily be knocked out by Izuku. Meanwhile, after that fight, another fight would end up beginning. This would decide who would end up going up against Izuku in the next round. We see Todoroki standing face to face with Suro, and just like in canon My Hero Academia, all Todoroki had to do was stomp his foot as a massive iceberg would end up coming in and just taking complete control over Suro, as he would then just be done. He couldn't move out of that, and so the round would be given to Todoroki. So with Todoroki now up against Izuku, Izuku would start stretching. As the match would begin, he would instantly know Todoroki was going to send an iceberg right at him. As Izuku would shatter the iceberg, he would then dodge another before shattering that one as well. Izuku would go and advancing towards him before yelling Todoroki that he wasn't going to beat him at only half his strength before punching Todoroki right across the face. However, Todoroki wouldn't budge at all, not caring about any of Izuku's words. As Izuku would jump back before just nodding his head. "I see. So, if you're gonna act that way then, I don't get why you don't use your quirk. It's your quirk after all. Who cares if hey, you got it from Endeavor. Can he control your flames? No! It's your quirk, Todoroki. It's yours, not his." Izuku saying this, all of a sudden a light bulb would go off in Todoroki's head, realizing that all of this time, everything he did just to avoid using Endeavor's quirk, it was actually his. And it just doesn't make any sense to him now. Realizing this, his flame side would burst out into flames like a volcano, or he would send flames towering over towards Izuku, spinning rapidly just like a tornado, so they would start closing in closer and closer onto Izuku inch by inch. Izuku would use his finger to flick it right back at Todoroki as his own flames would go right back at him. As Todoroki would jump out of the way dodging this, he would then look towards Izuku again, as he would see Izuku now flying right towards him before Izuku would punch him right across the face, sending him flying backwards. He would slam into one of his icebergs before falling down to the ground, as the iceberg that he had slammed into had protected him from falling out of bounds. As Todoroki would look on towards Izuku, would get up, racing towards him, using his ice to propel himself forward. As Izuku seeing this, he would punch the incoming Todoroki, as Todoroki would be sent flying one way before Izuku would appear out of nowhere, using his quick speed to punch him once again. As Izuku would then begin a flurry of quick punches, mimicking the movements of that of All Might. As Izuku would then grab onto Todoroki's face before slamming it down into the ground. Todoroki not being able to move, with Izuku just standing over him, making sure he didn't get up, the round would be given to Izuku. Seeing as Todoroki just couldn't go anywhere else with anything in the fight, he was defeated. There was no chance he was coming back from it. So as Izuku would be sitting there waiting, Ida would then walk up to Izuku, putting his hand out as if asking for a handshake. Izuku, seeing this, would shake Ida's hand before Ida would then wish Izuku luck in the semi-finals. And as to you, Ida, Izuku would say, as Izuku would end up walking up onto the arena. As the match would then begin, Ida would use his insanely quick speed, basically being his quirk, to rush right on towards Izuku before going for a kick. However, Izuku would duck down before punching Ida right into the stomach, as he would be ducked down using the force of his legs to propel his own fist forward right into the stomach of Ida, sending him flying upwards. Izuku would then jump, saying that Ida couldn't dodge just in the air, as Ida would try to use his engine quirk to move. However, it would only move him a slight couple of inches, as Izuku then jump up and, much like had done to Shinso, would raise both of his hands clenched together up above his head before slamming them down right into Ida's stomach. Once again, as Ida would then be sent flying downwards, as would then slam into the ground. Not wanting to be this fate, much like Shinso's fate in the first round, Ida would end up getting up, staring on towards Izuku. "I'm not gonna go down that easily," he would say, rushing on towards Izuku, punching Izuku right across the face before kicking him in the side of the head. As Izuku's feet would start to wobble from how quick Ida's punches and kicks had been, it would end up now being on the ground in the exact same place he had been when he had dodged one of Ida's kicks. As Izuku now here would swivel his feet, swiping the legs underneath Ida. As Ida would be falling down to the ground, Izuku would get right underneath him, putting both of his feet right onto Ida's back flat, before just punching Ida into the air, or kicking Ida into the air with his feet, as Izuku would jump into the air, punching Ida right across the face, before slamming him down for a second time, as Ida now just propelled right into the ground, who would end up being knocked out from the pain and velocity that was Izuku. As Izuku slamming his fist into him again, but this time even harder, this would cause Ida to go down right into the ground faster than ever, and this was just too much for the blue-haired boy, knocking him out almost instantly as he made contact with the ground. And so, with Izuku just defeating Ida in the semi-finals, that would only mean one thing. He was going to be facing off against Katsuki Bakugo in the finals of the UA Sports Festival. This is what Bakugo wanted, huh? To meet me in the finals. To finally show everybody that he's better than me. Well, I'll give him a chance at least, Izuku would think. As Izuku would remember all the countless times Bakugo would try to bully someone, just hungry for the attention that he craved so dearly, however Izuku had taken it away from him. As the match would then begin, with Bakugo flying on towards Izuku with a sadistic smile, slamming an explosion right to the upper chest of Izuku, smiling right as he did it. However, Izuku didn't move, tanking Bakugo's hit, as he would then maneuver himself using his explosions, sending a kick flying in the side of Izuku's head, mimicking the movements of that of Ida. As Bakugo would do this, Izuku still didn't move, not even his head or even a flinch. As Bakugo would do this again and again, punching Izuku even more. However, Izuku wouldn't move at all. As Bakugo would be doing this rapidly over and over again, the crowd was just in complete awe. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Izuku just wasn't moving as another student was just rapidly punching him with explosions. However, all of a sudden, Izuku would make a quick, rapid movement, grabbing the neck of Bakugo, as he would then stare right into Bakugo's eyes before punching him right in between them, sending him falling backwards, losing his balance as Bakugo would catch himself with an explosion, sending him flying right back into Izuku, as he would then receive a punch right across the face. As Bakugo now falling back onto the ground, he would fall down before tumbling over. He would stare back up at Izuku, as Izuku had caused him to lose all of his energy with how many explosions he had used. And Izuku admits he was quite hurt. Just being able to stand there, taking all of those hits, took quite a lot out of him. And so Izuku, now being injured and Bakugo not having enough energy to continue on the fight, Izuku knew he couldn't just keep this fight on going. He would have to end it once and for all. So with Izuku now using Black Whip, he would grab onto Bakugo before spinning round and round rapidly before let going of Black Whip, causing Bakugo to be sent flying out of the arena. As this would happen, Bakugo would slam into the side of the arena before falling down onto the soft green grass beneath him. As he would get up, he would look down to see that he was out of bounds before staring up at Izuku, who would raise his fist in the air, mimicking that of All Might, just signifying that he had won, and this was his victory. As Bakugo seeing this, he would slam his hands down into the ground, using an explosion as well, charring the grass beneath of his fists. We now cut forward to see Izuku standing atop of the first year podium with a gold medal around his neck. Bakugo just staring off into the corner as if he was trying not to cry or just look angry or upset, with a silver medal around his neck. And there in third place was Tenya Ida with a bronze medal around his neck, being able to take out Tokiyama. And so with that, we now see Izuku walking back towards the waiting room, where he would then get onto the bus, as it would then transport them back to the main UA building, where they would then have to choose what just hero agencies they wanted to go to. As Izuku would be sitting at his desk, or just sitting on the bus, many of the students would come up to him congratulating him on his victory, which Izuku would smile, just thanking them, or just saying that. So as Izuku would sit back down in his desk after being dropped off along with the rest of his class by the bus, Izuku would start to think. Gran Torino would never have offered him just an internship, since Izuku never was the just actual 9th user of One for All. He was never the successor of All Might in this timeline. Sure, he still has One for All, and that's because he was the successor of All Might in another timeline where Izuku was actually corkless. In this timeline, though, since Izuku was sent back in time or into a different reality by the Shigaraki of the future now, this would mean Izuku would take the place of the other Izuku, and so he would now have his quirks, as just from that age he took the place of the Izuku there. So as Izuku would be reading down the list, he would choose Endeavor's agency, as Endeavor thought it would be just good publicity to have just the UA Sports Festival winner there at his own agency. So with that, Izuku and Todoroki would be dropped off at Endeavor's agency, where they would then meet Burnin early, much like how they did in the work study in the newer season. So with that, Izuku there, as Endeavor would just teach them things from this and that, before just giving both of them just these quirk licenses that were only temporary, and they wouldn't be unlimited passes to just go around fighting villains for the rest of time. They were just temporary, as Endeavor even had to fight just to get them. Not real fight, but just negotiating to try to get these two to be able to use their quirks in combat in case they got separated. So with that, we cut forward a week to now see Izuku hopping from rooftop to rooftop. He had recently come in contact with the person that Ida had just internshipped with, as he would end up hearing that Ida had just miraculously disappeared, As Izuku hearing this, he would jump from rooftop to rooftop looking wherever Ida was. He remembered seeing Ida get a phone call saying that his brother Tensei had gotten attacked, and so Ida would end up hearing this and wanting revenge, wanting to kill the hero killer for just taking down his brother Tensei from how just cool he was. It just doesn't make any sense. Why would he attack Tensei? He was a pure hero after all, wasn't he? At least that's what Ida thought. As Ida would be looking for the hero killer, he would finally end up finding him. However, Ida would come to realize he was far too weak to take care of the hero killer by himself. So we now see Ida now on the ground, completely paralyzed by Stain's quirk. With Stain with a sword right above Ida's shoulder, he would slam it, digging into Ida's shoulder. However, Izuku would end up sliding into the alleyway from the rooftop after jumping down to the streets, knowing it would be faster if he just decided to run. As Izuku seeing this, he would start to jump from wall to wall, building up kinetic energy. Using his quirk function, he would then propel himself right towards Stain, just like a bullet, as it would hit Stain with such a high velocity, sending him flying right through 3 buildings behind him. As Stain, having just gone through tons upon tons of concrete, cement, and brick, would just not even be able to get up. Just so much injuries from that one attack. As Izuku would look over towards Ida, asking him if he was okay, before picking up Ida and the hero native, who was also there, onto his shoulders, before getting them out of the alleyway. As Izuku would hit a button, giving just Todoroki his location to hopefully have Todoroki come here as he dealt with Stain. After a minute or so, Stain would end up getting up, wobbling on his feet from how hard Izuku had hit him. However, the thought of getting captured was too much for Stain, knowing that he couldn't just have his movement die right there by the hands of a UA brat, who most likely just wanted to be a hero for the money and fame. So as Stain would get up, he would launch himself right towards Izuku, slashing towards him. However, with a single flick of Izuku's finger and one for all, Stain's sword would be shattered into thousands little tiny pieces. As Stain would be staring at that, he would be punched right across the face before being punched right on the forehead. As his head would cock back, Izuku would then punch him twice with both of his fists right into his jaw. Says John how broken he would fall down to the ground holding onto it. As Izuku would stand over him before knocking him out with a single chop to his neck, seeing as he was no longer used to continue on fighting. Todoroki would roll up as he would then say, "Izuku, what happened?" Ida got himself into a little mix-up with the hero killer here, so I just had to put the hero killer into his place. Just please call an ambulance. Izuku asked before he would end up asking Ida a question. Ida, why would you go get revenge? This is nothing like you. It was my brother. He almost killed my brother. Izuku would nod his head in understandment before walking off. We now skip forward to see Ida sitting in a hospital bed with the police chief talking to him about how he just shouldn't have done that and this and that, how it was wrong, just legally and this, that, all of the random different laws Ida broke and just random things. As Izuku would end up leaving, we now see him in the classroom with Ida there as well. Skipping forward a month, we now hear that it is finals week. However, they are going to be going up to the mountains to train for their final exams, which are going to be happening in just 1 week's time. So as Izuku would hear this, would end up hearing that many of his classmates would end up going to go to a mall to hopefully try to get some supplies that they would need to go to the training camp in order to prepare for their final exam. Izuku hearing this would end up realizing that Shigaraki was most likely going to be there, and so Izuku wanted to get another chance to meet him. Walking over towards the mall with all of his classmates, Izuku would sit down on the exact same bench in the exact same spot he had in Canon My Hero Academia. As Izuku would be sitting there, no one would end up showing up, as Shigaraki didn't want to risk meeting such a strong individual, as he didn't think he could beat Izuku, as he didn't even know Izuku was the successor of One For All at all. All For One may have thought signs of it, but Izuku was never close to All Might in this. As much as Izuku wanted to, All Might just pushed him away. Frustration towards Izuku, having Izuku stop him, and just them not really meeting on the right of terms, and Izuku trying to stop him from injuring people, and it never really happened. So how are we supposed to know it really happened? All the injury with All Might, they just were never on the best of terms. So with that, Shigaraki would play it safe to not meet up with someone so strong. It was like meeting up with Endeavor and risking getting caught. So with that, now see all of them walking back to just the UA dormitories after they would end up being built after the USJ. And so with all of them there, many of the students would end up just flaunting what they had gotten at the mall, showing it off to everyone. As Izuku, not really caring, would end up going to bed, just tired that he didn't end up meeting Shigaraki for the second time. And so after that, we now cut forward a day to see all of the students on a bus heading towards just the training camp. However, before that would end up happening, we end up seeing All Might walk in to Night Eye's agency. Night Eye, do you happen to know where Mirio is? Oh, All Might, did you finally wise up and decide to give Mirio your cork? It's quite the smart decision of you, don't you think? As All Might would end up nodding his head. There is someone in Class 1A saying that he's the 9th successor of One For All, which I don't really get, saying as I never gave my cork to anybody. That is quite strange. However, I've been studying possibilities of quirks allowing you to jump into different timelines or send other people to different realities. I think that might be a simple cause of it, but it's only a theory, that is. Possibly. Anyway, Mirio's just down the hall. He's training in the gym, I would say. We now see a bus come screeching to a halt as we see Class 1A step out of the bus, as they would all stare on, looking just at everything that was around them. Seeing just a massive forest, all of the sudden, the wild pussycats would end up coming out of nowhere before telling all of the students that the training camp was 3 miles that way, and good luck, before the ground would start rumbling underneath them, so they would then all fall down off of a cliff onto the just ground beneath of them. As they would then see mud monsters come running towards them, Izuku would take action, jumping in, slamming both of his fists into 2 mud monsters' faces, destroying them instantly. They weren't the strongest, but they were still strong. Izuku had seen and just felt the events about to happen with danger sense, but he just didn't decide to do anything. With the help of his classmates, they would all make it to the training camp with ease in just around 25 minutes or so. Some of them lagging behind because some had shorter legs than others or just didn't have the stamina that many people did. All of them sitting at the training camp waiting for what was next to happen. As we now cut forward a couple days, as we see all of the students panting after having just a long training session be finished. All of them just couldn't believe it. They were just so tired after all. They had gone through such a long and grueling process of training. It was so hard, many of them would think. So, as they would be doing this, we now see Izuku walking into the facility to go and just relax for a bit and to settle down after so many days of training. However, he would end up hearing that many of his classmates were going to be doing just some sort of hide-and-seek type thing outside in the woods. Izuku really didn't care for it, and so he would just be staying inside relaxing. However, Izuku would end up smelling the fumes of smoke, as Izuku would end up realizing something. After all that just hours of training, he had forgotten. This was the day that the League of Villains attacked. The Vanguard Action Squad, as they called it. Izuku would race out before seeing Aizawa and the other wild pussycats that were still at the training camp staring on the massive blaze tackling through the trees. As Izuku would be seeing that, look around, looking for any just people there. Any villains there, exactly. As Izuku would end up remembering something. Koda! How could he have forgotten? Izuku would rush off towards the mountain as he would end up seeing a towering villain over him. As he would end up seeing Muscular towering over the young boy, Izuku would end up running so fast that he had built up kinetic energy, flying at Muscular just like a bullet, slamming into him, much like he did to Stain. So Muscular would be sent flying right back into the wall of just pure rock behind him, as he would end up falling down to the ground just from how hard the hit was. He had been completely knocked out, as Izuku would end up tying him up with some of the core-canceling just tape he had been using to train. With now done, Izuku would grab Koda before bringing him back towards the heroes. However, he would see that both of them, all of them there, were surrounded. With Magni and Spinner closing in on them, Izuku jumping in with Koda in his arms would end up kicking Magni right across the face before flicking Spinner right into a tree. Izuku would hand Koda to Mandalay before rushing off to go find the rest of his classmates. As Izuku would end up meeting up with Bakugo and Todoroki, he would see that they were then in the midst of a fight with a peculiar villain with just teeth that were as jagged as rocks and as sharp as knives. As Izuku seeing this, teeth would launch out right at Izuku. However, Izuku would jump up over them before having his foot land on one of the teeth, jumping up, shattering the teeth in the process, before punching the person right across the face, shattering even more of their teeth. As Izuku would then kick Moonfish, the hero, or not the hero, the villain with all of the teeth, on the teeth quirk, right back down towards Todoroki, who would then freeze him solid into ice. As this would be happening, all of a sudden a portal would end up opening underneath Bakugo. As Izuku, sensing this was about to happen, he would grab onto Bakugo's hand, throwing him up into a tree, as Izuku would end up, just seeing the portal end up closing, as all of the sudden a black-haired person would end up stepping out of another portal that had just been created on the tree. You're making this harder than it has to be. Really. It's just... Can you please not mess around with us right now? I really don't want to have to deal with you, a person would say, before spewing blue fire right out of their hands, barreling blue fire right on towards Izuku. Izuku would jump over it before flicking his fingers, causing wind pressure to consume all of that fire, just spewing it outwards. As Izuku would end up seeing the person standing in front of him. "Hello, Dabi," Izuku would say. Dabi would say this before his eyes would end up widening. "How do you know my villain name? Have you heard of me, by any chance?" Dabi would say, looking on towards Izuku. However, Izuku would only look at him with a glance. Or Izuku would end up grabbing both Todoroki and Bakugo before jumping off. However, right as Izuku jumped off, Mr. Compress would end up grabbing all three of them within his hand. As he would look at all three of the marbles, he would end up falling down to the ground. These guys are so powerful. It's causing my quirk to act up, he would say, with the 3 marbles in hand. It was at his very limit to be able to have 3 marbles, and just people compressed down. As he would toss them over to Dabi, he would catch them before smiling. "Quite the haul we got, don't you think?" He would say before falling back into the portal, as Mr. Compress would follow with him as well. As we now see All For One sitting in the League of Villains main base, having decided to come out of where he was hiding and to come and travel there, hoping to see and talk to some of the people that they had kidnapped. As they now see Bakugo, Todoroki, and Izuku all sitting in chairs that were quirk canceling. "Wow, you did get quite the haul, you say, Dabi. 3 people. and it just happens to be some of the 3 strongest kids in Class 1A. Bakugo Katsuki, someone with a very powerful explosion quirk. Izuku Midoriya, a strength quirk and some other types of quirks. You're a confusing one. And Shoto Todoroki, the son of Endeavor. If we can manage to turn all of you into villains, that would be quite interesting, huh? Wouldn't you say, Shigaraki? Oh, yes, it would be, would say. However, Izuku would end up having the handcuffs around him start to wobble. You should have taught them to put handcuffs onto people better. All for one, Izuku would say. All for one would stare down towards Izuku's handcuffs before pointing at them. You idiot! You didn't tie those tight enough, would say. As Izuku would then break free of the handcuffs, he would then propel himself right on towards All for One, going towards a punch, as his punch would start flying right on towards All for One's face. Izuku's fist slams right into the helmet of All for One, shattering it instantly. As he grabs his head in pain, he looks on, staring daggers right on at Izuku. He would get up after falling down to the ground before looking on at Izuku. So I guess it's gonna have to be that way. However, before All for One could even finish his sentence, he would be punched right across the face once again by Izuku, and then once more right under the chin, sending his head staring upwards, where you would then see the fist of Izuku flying down, slamming, making contact right onto All for One's face once again. One would then feel a flurry of punches make contact with his stomach, so he would stare to see Izuku continue on his flurry of punches, making sure that All for One didn't even have any time to move or react. As Izuku was doing this, he would then look back, turning his hand before flicking, causing the chairs under Bakugo and Todoroki to both be destroyed. As both of them now up and with the quirk-canceling handcuffs off of them, they would both use their quirks against the League of Villains, as they were now fighting the League while Izuku was fighting All for One. As the shaking and rumbling of the city would end up occurring, news helicopters and police cars would end up rolling up to the scene. However, the cars on the ground couldn't make it due to just destroyed buildings all around the fighting zone. As Izuku, in the midst of his fight with All for One and Bakugo and Todoroki fighting the League, they had caused just the destruction of many abandoned buildings around them, basically causing for no one to be able to get through there with a car. However, the helicopter scene would be able to capture everything right in the midst of the fight. As we now cut back to see all of Class 1A staring on at someone's phone who is watching the news live, seeing their 3 classmates go up head-to-head against some of the most threat they've ever faced at UA. As Izuku would be staring at All for One, he would then start to laugh before cracking his knuckles. So I guess you really are the 9th user of One for All. It's quite a shame that the One for All trail's gonna have to end here, isn't it, Izuku? All for One would say in a striking voice, as Izuku would look up at All for One. I always knew my son would end up becoming a star. However, I didn't know he'd actually be One for All's holder. However, it does boggle the mind knowing that you had One for All since you were right around the age of 4. Not sure if you accidentally ate one of All Might's hairs or something stupid like that. But you somehow found out how to get One for All. I don't understand you. What about that, huh? I don't understand my own son. Well, who cares now, anyway? All for One would say, reaching out his hand, grabbing onto Izuku's head. Izuku's still so shocked to find out that All for One was his own father. Izuku just didn't understand it. However, as he would feel One for All flowing out of him, however, it would instantly go right back into him. Izuku would punch All for One right in the stomach. You can't take One for All, for one. I thought that was quite easy to understand for you. But I guess it wasn't, Izuku would say, are flying back over towards All For One, using Black Whip to pull All For One closer to him while doing this, before punching All For One once again right in the face, before punching him in the stomach once more. All Might would then jump down, still in the middle of his prime, punching All For One right across the face, as we now see Mirio following so far behind him, having just been taught by All Might how to use One For All. As we now see One For All, the 9th user of this universe, Mirio, the 8th user, All Might, and the real 9th user, Deku, all fighting All For One at once. Just the middle of a battle going on. It was just the battle of the ages. However, right as All For One was in this, you would then start laughing. I don't understand it, but somehow there's 3 One For All users standing in front of me. Well then, Shigaraki. All For One snaps as Shigaraki appears right in front of him. You're gonna have to do this fight from now on, because I'm not gonna make it anymore. My body has already started giving up on me. So now, you're the one calling all the shots, All For One would say, as his body would then start quickly deteriorating, or just all of his flesh and muscle would turn to dust, as only there stood just a pile of bones. So those quickly too disintegrated, disappearing without a trace. As Shigaraki would be standing there now, feeling so much power flow through to his bones, as he would then start laughing maniacally. He had all the power he wanted in his hands. He wasn't injured like that fool All For One was. He now had every right and control to do whatever he so chose to do. As Shigaraki would continue on laughing, his head would violently turn towards Mirio, before reaching out his hand, grabbing Mirio. So Mirio was forced to rush right towards Shigaraki, as if Shigaraki was using some kind of discount version of the Force. As Mirio would be standing there, Shigaraki using this telekinetic power would then come right up to Shigaraki, who would then grab his neck, as Mirio would be looking on desperately towards All Might and Izuku, using his eyes to beg for help. They could only do nothing but watch, as Mirio would then be crushed down into a tiny little cube before having it thrown right across the city. So All Might would look on at his successor completely killed. He would rush right over towards Shigaraki, winding his fist back, punching Shigaraki right in the gut. However, it did nothing at all. Shigaraki would laugh towards All Might. When will you learn, All Might? You're not ever going to be able to defeat every villain. And now it's time for you to join your successor in the tower I'm gonna start creating out of all my victims, Shigaraki would say, using his kinetic power, grabbing onto All Might, crushing him down into a cube, throwing him back in the direction where Mirio was as well. Izuku staring, and Shigaraki would then rush towards Shigaraki, whose back was turned, as he would punch Shigaraki right across the face, as Shigaraki would then turn towards Izuku, punching him as well, both with such equal power. Izuku and Shigaraki were both in their prime, using over 100% of their power to fight each other, as Izuku would punch Shigaraki and Shigaraki would punch Izuku. They were in the middle of a fight, and every blow would not go without another blow, or say Izuku sent a punch, it would either be blocked or landed. However, after that, Shigaraki would send a punch as well. They were equaling each other out, and it was clear that no one was going to come out of this fight victorious. So as Shigaraki would continue on fighting Izuku, Bakugo and Todoroki, who had just finished their fight with Dabi, would end up rushing on to help Izuku out, freezing Shigaraki. However, he would easily break free of the ice, easily sending a wave of energy, knocking out Todoroki. As Bakugo would then use his explosions to get in close to Shigaraki. However, Izuku would dive in, catching Bakugo. Bakugo, don't be rash here. Shigaraki's power far outnumbers yours. You will die if you continue on this fight. Fine. If it means I'll go down as a hero, then I'm willing to go for that cause. Izuku only smiled before staring on at Shigaraki. Well, fine then, he would say, as they would then both rush on over towards Shigaraki, as both of them would go for a punch, Izuku using one for all, Bakugo using his explosion, as both of their punches would land right directly on the forehead of Shigaraki, as they would then direct their punch downwards, slamming the body of Shigaraki right into the ground. As this would be happening, Shigaraki would get up, uppercutting both of them in the stomach before slamming them back down into the ground. However, Izuku would then jump back, grabbing Bakugo before grabbing him by the foot. As Izuku would then start jumping back and forth, carrying Bakugo at the same time, before you'd throw Bakugo right towards Shigaraki, as Bakugo would then create a massive explosion, creating a huge cloud of dust. As Izuku would continue jumping back and forth quickly as fast as he could, all of a sudden he would stop before staring directly where he thought Shigaraki was. Crouching down on his feet, he would then rush over, using his kinetic energy core, launching himself right at Shigaraki with velocity of over 1000% of what One For All could do. As Izuku would be flying so fast, he would land a direct punch right onto Shigaraki's face, completely destroying it, shattering Shigaraki's jaw and the upper part of his skull. Shigaraki would fall down to the ground, all of his teeth laying on before him. He would barely be able to get up, as the healing quirk that he had gotten for one wasn't doing anything. It just couldn't keep up with how fast he was getting injured. As would stand up, barely being able to move, Izuku would then look on towards Shigaraki. "That punch I just did to you, Shigaraki. No matter how strong your regeneration quirk is, you're not going to be able to live from those injuries," Izuku would say, pointing it out. As Shigaraki would be staring at Izuku, he would then create a massive cloud of just complete dark energy. "Well then, I'm not going to go down without killing you either," he would say. However, right behind him, Bakugo would come up, slamming both of his hands right into the sides of Shigaraki's already broken skull, slamming two explosions right into there, as he would then fall down to the ground, completely just brain dead from all the injuries to the head. As Izuku and Bakugo would then fall down to the ground, completely void of all energy. They just couldn't move anymore. After all those months of competing with each other, it actually turned into somewhat of a rivalry, and the hatred towards one another had just dissipated completely when they were fighting for their lives. As we now see many heroes rush in, grabbing the dead Shigaraki and grabbing both Izuku and Bakugo, along with Todoroki, rushing them off towards the hospital. We cut forward a week to see Izuku waking up, holding onto his head, as his head would start throbbing and pounding in pain. As Izuku would look around, he would see all of his classmates surrounding him, as Izuku would only just laugh. "Well, luckily, both me and Bakugo had managed to stop this world's greatest threat. Finally. All my work is finally complete," Izuku would say, before falling back asleep, just not caring world about anything. We now cut forward a month to see Izuku walking into Night Eye's agency. Izuku had easily passed the hero licensing exam, or quirk licensing exam, along with helping Bakugo to pass it this time, after their rivalry had turned into sort of a brotherly bond towards them. Izuku would help Bakugo turn his anger and just turn it into something that would help him in the battlefield. So we now see Izuku taking the work study, as would then tell Night Eye the exact location of Overhaul's base. "That's his base, right there. It should be quite easy to take down, don't you think? Well, without Mirio and All Might, this would be quite hard. Too bad they had to die in that fight. But at least their contribution didn't go just without any consequences towards that fiend Shigaraki, of course. So, what do you think we should do about this Overhaul's base? What do you think, Izuku?" "Oh, I just think we should just rush it immediately. I don't think it needs too much planning. I mean, I did take out Shigaraki, so that's one thing. And I don't think Overhaul can possibly manage to be stronger than him. Yeah, you may have a point there. You know, I'm gonna plan something, but I'm not gonna stop you from doing anything else foolish, since I really can't stop you. I would say, as Izuku would only nod his head, as Izuku would then suit up into his hero costume before walking around the streets where he knew the exact time and date where Eri would end up rushing out of the hallway. As this would happen, she would bump into Izuku, as Izuku would then look down at her. "Oh, hello there," as Overhaul would then turn the corner. "Come on, Eri," he would say in a cold voice, as she would get up scared, looking on at Izuku, begging for help, as Izuku would then grab onto her shoulder. "Hey, young lady, is this man your father, or guardian of yours?" She would look onto him, just completely scared for what he had done. Overhaul would look back, staring right on at Izuku, staring at him with such intensity. However, Izuku didn't care at all. "I know your whole problem, Overhaul, and I'm here to take back this little girl and give her a life she truly deserves." Overhaul would rush towards Izuku, taking off his glove to try to touch him. However, Izuku would only dodge this, grabbing onto Overhaul's neck, throwing him into a building behind him, as a store clerk would see Overhaul slam into some of his shelves. As he then sees Izuku walk in. "Sorry about this. I'll pay for it later." Izuku would say, staring on towards the knocked out Overhaul, putting on clerk-canceling handcuffs onto him. Thankfully, he wasn't on guard too much, so he went down without a fight. Izuku would then kick the body of Overhaul right into Night Eye's office, who would stare down at it as Izuku would then introduce Eri. Overhaul would be seen there as Night Eye would only just start laughing. You are an anomaly, Izuku. As we now cut forward just years into the future, with Izuku's knowledge just having been faded behind, as he just had basically no need to have any of the knowledge of the past anymore, since he's now 21 years old and the number 1 hero, as Bakugo Katsuki would be the number 2 hero and Todoroki Shoto would be the number 3 hero. These three, as the big 3 heroes, would just rule against Japan's just villains all throughout time, making sure that these villains never would rise up again, as the crime rate would drop below 1% with the reign of these top 3 heroes. And that is where What If Manga Deku Went Back in Time comes to an end. I hope you all did enjoy it, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.